Good morning to you all, especially to our listeners and viewers on YouTube on this interactive session conference on our second day of the conference. Our keynote address today will be given by His Excellency the Nuncio Van Bertus the Nuncio to Kenya. And it will be followed up with the Hekima College panel and a panel organized by our colleagues from Uganda and Malawi. We started our conference yesterday with a keynote speech from His Eminence Cardinal Michael Cherney from the Dicastery for Human Integral Development, and then followed by the America Hub the whole day yesterday. So this morning we are starting with the Africa Hub. Before I invite His Excellency the Nuncio to Kenya, I would like to start with a word of prayer from Pope Francis, a prayer for immigrants, because our conference is inspired by Fratelli Tutti, the encyclical letter of Pope Francis of 2020, but also inspired by the meeting between His Holiness Pope Francis and the Sheikh Al-Tayeb from the Al-Azhar University. So it has an interreligious connotation. So since 2020, we have decided together with the Global Ministries University in California and Harmony Institute here in Nairobi with other partners to promote human fraternity based on the document of the Pope, Fratelli Tutti. And this year it is our third edition, where we take each time a specific topic from the teaching of His Holiness Pope Francis. And this year we have chosen refugees, migrants, displaced people belonging together in solidarity. And would like to thank very much His Excellency to be with us today and to address us on the same topic. We cannot take it for granted for you to have accepted to be part of this conversation, and we really highly appreciate your presence with us today. So we are having an interactive session with our listeners and viewers who are following us on YouTube. You are most welcome. So we start with a word of prayer, and as said, we take the prayer from Pope Francis himself, a Pope's prayer for immigrants. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Merciful God, we pray to you for all the men, women, and children who have died after leaving their homelands in search of a better life. Though many of their graves bear no name, to you each one is known, loved, and cherished. May we never forget them, but honor their sacrifice. With deeds more than words, we entrust to you all those who have made this journey, enduring fear, uncertainty, and humiliation, in order to reach a place of safety and hope. Just as you never abandoned your son as he was brought to a safe place by Mary and Joseph, so now be close to these, your sons and daughters, through our tenderness and protection. In caring for them, may we seek a world where none are forced to leave their home and where all can live in freedom, dignity, and peace. Merciful God and Father of all, wake us from the slumber of indifference, open our eyes to their suffering, and free us from the insensitivity born of worldly comfort and self-centeredness. Inspire us as nations, communities, and individuals to see that those who come to our shores are our brothers and sisters. May we share with them the blessings we have received from your hand and recognize that together, as one human family, we are all immigrants, journeying in hope to you, our true home, where every tear will be wiped away, where we will be at peace and safe in your embrace. We make our prayer through Christ our Lord. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Yeah. So I remind you that the keynote address this morning is being given by His Excellency the Nuncio to Kenya. So welcome, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much, Father, for inviting me this morning to be with you to speak on this topic of migrants, refugees, displaced persons, and solidarity. As you mentioned already, I'm the apostolic here in Kenya. Till very recently, I was also in South Sudan. Have been living a number of years in Africa, greater part of that in Sudan, in Khartoum, and in Eritrea. And have, in that sense, one might say, a first-hand experience of what refugees and migration is really all about. So today, as I was celebrating Holy Mass this morning, and maybe some of you also went to Holy Mass this morning already. By the way, we are in Nairobi at the moment. It's 9:07 in the morning. This morning, the Friday of the fourth week of the year, ordinary time, we are still reading out of the letter to the Hebrews. And this morning, really, as if the organizers had wanted it like that, it starts with the following sentence, that passage, Hebrews 13th chapter. It says, "Continue to love each other like brothers, and remember always to welcome strangers, for by doing this, some people have entertained angels without knowing it." I think that is very meaningful text also for this discussion. The author of the letter of the Hebrews is encouraging us to be open, to be welcoming to brothers, to visitors. Remember always to welcome strangers. By doing this, some people have entertained angels without knowing. Of course, he refers to the book of Genesis, where Abraham is receiving strangers there at the oak of Mamre, and he finds out that they are angels, they are messengers. And I think that is also the whole theme of this discussion, is about how migrants and refugees that are seen many times as burden, as problem in society, that they in many ways are messengers, angels, people who contribute to society and are able to give at times a new view on the reality. So that in a sense as a kind of introduction. Dear guests, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, it's a privilege and an honor to reflect with you on this topic that touches the very shared humanity, belonging together, migrants, refugees, displaced persons, and global solidarity. In a world shaped by a movement, whether voluntary or forced, we are challenged to rethink our perspectives on human existence, mutual care, and the future of coexistence. In the spirit of Fratelli Tutti, Pope Francis calls us to a renewed sense of universal fraternity, urging us to build bridges of encounter rather than walls of exclusion. Today, as we gather to discuss this belonging together, we must listen deeply to the voices of migrants, refugees, and displaced persons, allowing their experiences to shape our understanding of human existence, our commitment to mutual care, and our collective responsibility for a future of peace and I will explore three reflective trajectories that deepen our understanding of these issues and the call to These three tragedies of human existence. Second, migrants and the frameworks of mutual care for the common good. And third, the quest for inclusion and intergenerational consensus. Let's then start with the first point, migration, standing. Migration is as old as human civilization itself. It has shaped societies, economies, and cultures throughout history, continues to do so. Yet, the forced movement of people due to war, persecution, and economic hardships reminds us of the fragility of human existence. The stories of migrants, refugees, and displaced persons offer profound insights into resilience, hope, and survival. Their experiences teach us that human existence is not defined by static borders, but by the continuous search for security, unity, and dignity. Their courage in the face of adversity reminds us that vulnerability is a shared human condition. No one is, and every society bears a responsibility to uphold the dignity of those. As Fratelli Tutti reminds us, each day I have to decide whether to be good Samaritans or indifferent. Let me just immediately expand also on this from my personal experience that I was just sharing here with some of our friends, like a bit like Cardinal Czerny. I am born in the Netherlands, I'm Dutch, I have a Dutch passport, but if you would analyze my blood, so to say, and first of all, that I'm half a German, that I'm also half a Belgian, that I'm French, that I'm Jewish, and that back down there's even some Spanish blood. All these people came in, they amalgamated and formed the being which I am today, and also contributed to the culture in which I. Another remark I would like to make on this first paragraph just said that no one is immune to crisis, and every society bears a responsibility to uphold the dignity of those. Myself, I've worked a long time in Khartoum, like 10 years of my life I spent. And the idea in Khartoum was always, the idea, by the way, I did not share, but the idea was always that Khartoum would never get involved as the city because were very peaceful. They were very open, hospitable, and therefore there was no reason for conflict. So then when finally the war came, as it did, unfortunately, still in that war, that came as a surprise to many. Many had to leave their houses, had to leave their livelihood within a week, had no preparation, had to flee the city, had to get out as soon as possible. That once again illustrated to me, just said, no one is immune to crisis. What happens today to the refugee, migrant, happened to you. Migration reveals the interconnectedness of human life. When migrants flee conflicts, natural disasters, or economic collapse, their journeys expose the deeper structures of inequality and injustice. Their lived experiences push us to ask difficult questions. How do you define home? What does it mean? What responsibilities do those in positions of privilege have towards those who are displaced? Yet, to answer these questions, we have to be open to the realities that these migrants and refugees encounter. We have to address these realities and conditions adequately. Then, understanding human condition or human existence through the lens of migration calls for an ethic of empathy and responsibility. It urges us to recognize migration is not an anomaly, but a defining feature of the human experience, one met with compassion rather than. In this sense, I would like to challenge all of us to see, even in your personal history, the history of your family, how much of migration is not involved for personal history, but also in the history of your family. Few of us can claim to be that pure nation, that pure ethnic group. Migrants and refugees teach us that human existence is fragile yet resilient. Their experiences remind us that at the heart of migration lies a search for dignity, for life, and for hope. And their stories of loss, courage, adaptation, and faith invite us to recognize that we are all, one way or another, travelers seeking a place of belonging, ultimately travelers to our. Migration, therefore, challenges the illusion of self-sufficiency, calls us to embrace the reality that our destinies are, challenges us to rethink rigid notions of belonging, of identity, of culture, urging societies to embrace diversity as an inherent and enriching aspect of the human condition. By listening to the stories of migrants, refugees, and displaced persons, gain deeper insight into the personal human need for home, unity, acceptance. Let's then move to the second. Migrants, frameworks of mutual care for the migrants, of course, do not arrive as they bring with them their skills, their aspirations, their cultures, determination, tribute. Let me also expand on this one immediately. As I said, I came from Khartoum, later on also the nuncio in Sudan, which is also a country I know well. Quite a number of the refugees of Khartoum made their way to the south, made their way into South Sudan. Of course, first and foremost, South Sudanese who had lived already for many years in Khartoum, but then also many people who were originally from the region in and around Khartoum made their way into South. Some of them well educated, some of them lawyers, some of them doctors. It's interesting that now, for example, in Juba, you can do certain medical operations which before were not possible. And they are possible today because of the migrants that came moving in Khartoum. So migrants, refugees, can contribute to their presence among us is not a burden, but an opportunity to redefine our frameworks of caring. Fratelli Tutti calls for a shift from a culture of exclusion to one of encounter, where every person's dignity is held and where social structures facilitate rather than hinder. That last word, integration, is of course very, because far too often it happened, speaking now of Europe, speaking now of my own experience, that migrants would move into this, and as it was mentioned before, that has happened many times before, but they would remain in a kind of a ghetto city, remaining among themselves out of fear of the new world that surrounded them, not being able to integrate, not being facilitated. It is therefore also the role of the receiving society to facilitate people to be able to adapt and to be absorbed in society, to be able to identify with the new reality of society, which is not only for the good of the receiving society, also for the migrant himself. He needs to know language, he needs to know values, he needs to know on how to behave in a society, he needs to know on what is expected from him in the receiving society. We must recognize how migrants contribute to economies, vitalize communities, and enrich societies with cultural diversity. In their resilience and resourcefulness, they embody the values of hard work, creativity, and their contributions challenge us to build inclusive social and economic systems that recognize every person's right to participate fully in community life. As Pope Francis notes, no one will ever openly deny that they, migrants, are human beings, yet in practice, by our decisions and the way we treat them, we can show that we consider them as less worthy, less important, less human. Fratelli number 13. Therefore, far from being passive recipients of aid, migrants, refugees, and displaced persons actively contribute to society's state. Skills, cultural knowledge, labor, and the entrepreneurial spirit fuel economic innovation, social health healthcare workers on the front lines of global crisis, artists, teachers, and business owners revitalizing communities, migrants play a crucial role in shaping. Give you one very practical example. There is a Sudanese, and well, because he worked with me in Khartoum, was able to make his way into his family. He settled down in Holland. Now, he and his wife both became nurses. Nurses is a profession which in Holland is highly searched after because there are not enough of them. So, as a migrant, he is contributing in a very essential way to the well-being of a receiving society. Being economic contributions, migrants redefine what it means to care. Resilience foster empathy, inspiring policies and practices that prioritize inclusivity and dignity. Their integration into new communities can strengthen social trust and mutual aid, reinforcing the idea that collective well-being is only possible when no one. Communities that embrace migrants find themselves enriched by their resilience and resourcefulness. Through their engagement in many activities within the society, migrants expand our collective understanding of care and responsibility. They enrich the notion of charity with solidarity, where mutual benefit arises from inclusion and shared effort. As we build frameworks for mutual care, we must recognize that hospitality is not simply an act of generosity, charity. It is an investment in the common good. By fostering environments where migrants can contribute meaningfully, societies cultivate resilience, innovation. Here again, as I was mentioned before, coming from the society which many times has the name of being a very tolerant, at the same time people came to discover that that tolerance was also a lack of interest in the other. You can do whatever you want, as long as you do not disturb me. So that kind of attitude, which didn't really foster a greater adaptation to the receiving source. And it's only in the last 10 years, I would say, that authorities are looking into ways to help migrants find their way into the new society so as to avoid this kind of ghetto phenomenon that sometimes might happen when migrants come in, which is not good for the migrant himself, neither does it do. A society that welcomes migrants is a society that affirms human dignity. Migrants remind us that the strength of a community lies not in its homogeneity, but in its ability to extend care beyond the boundaries of nationality, ethnicity, and status. Their presence urges us to reimagine policies and institutions that promote inclusivity, equitable labor laws, accessible healthcare, and our responsibility is to ensure that the common good is not defined in exclusionary terms, but is understood as a shared endeavor in which migrants, refugees, and displaced persons play an interest. This requires policies of labor practices, access to education and healthcare, and mechanisms that uphold human dignity rather than exploit human value. The third point, the quest for inclusion and intergenerational normative consent. Pursuit for safety, inclusion, and participation is not unique to migrants. It is a universal humanism. However, migrants, refugees, and displaced persons, through their struggles and triumphs, illuminate the importance of building societies founded on shared values of peace, existence. And I would say there also the whole problem of interreligious dialogue in the shared values of justice, peace, and existence. Because at times those values are not exactly identical, and you need a kind of a dialogue to understand where the other come from and how much you or I am able to give in order that we meet somewhere and able to amalgate as a society. Their voices must not only be heard, but actively included in the processes that shape policies and participatory approach ensures that the frameworks guiding migration and integration reflect the real needs, aspirations, goals. So when it's about participation, it's not only the participation of the migrant into the existing society, but it's also the other way around, the society which shows interest to the migrant so that it becomes a real acceptance. Their aspirations, migrants, for a protected and participatory life must be at the heart of our efforts to build a just world. If we are to achieve an intergenerational consensus on shared values, that is, values of dignity, mutual respect, and peaceful coexistence, we must begin by listening to those on the margins and including them in the future. As it was said before, it is in the interest of the welcoming society, the receiving society, to include the migrant in building up that society. That the migrant does not withdraw into his shell, does not withdraw into the safety of his ghetto, where he feels or she feels at home within the little group of people who may speak the same language, may have the same culture, may have the same religion, without having too much of communication outside of that little group. A truly participatory society is one where the voices of migrants are heard in decision-making spaces, where policies reflect their realities, and where their human rights are centered. Fratelli Tutti warns against the perils of indifference, calling instead for a culture of encounter that recognizes every person as a brother or a sister. Fratelli. This is the foundation for a future in which all people, regardless of race or status or religion, can live in harmony. This intergenerational responsibility, so a responsibility that goes over the here and now, but looks at this intergenerational responsibility calls upon us to instill in future generations a sense of ethical duty towards one. It requires educational systems that foster empathy, legal structures that guarantee rights, and social narratives that promote unity. It is only by embracing these principles of fraternity and solidarity that we can ensure a tomorrow where belonging is not a privilege for a happy few, but a birthright for all. This has to build such a consensus, we must engage in an intercultural dialogue, bridge gaps in understanding, and challenge a narrative that dehumanizes. Societies must invest in education that emphasizes global citizenship and the importance of diversity. And governments must adopt policies that prioritize inclusion or exclusion. And individuals must challenge prejudice wherever they are. When we acknowledge the aspirations of migrants as human pursuits, we take an essential step towards a world that is not divided by fear, but united by shared ethical commitments. By the way, that is easier said than done. Having been myself in many ways involved in those kind of processes, it is a struggle. It takes time. It takes time for a newcomer into a society. Opt. Many times it will not even truly work. First generation, you need second generation, sometimes even third generation before people really are able to adjust themselves. In a sense, migration is more than arriving in the country. It's a whole process that only starts once you cross the. You have had one exodus coming out of your country, traveling through all kinds of perils, maybe into the receiving country. But then again, it takes time once you are in the receiving country, in your final destination, adjust to that new reality that many times question many years. In addressing migration, we have an opportunity to forge an ethical consensus that transcends national. Migration governance must move beyond reactionary policies towards a framework that upholds universal human rights, effective response. A world that ensures safe, dignified, and orderly migration is a world that acknowledges the inherent worth of every person, regardless of origin. A call to action. The words of Fratelli Tutti, we were made for love, it says in number 88. Love calls us to recognize in each migrant, refugee, and displaced person a reflection of our shared humanity. Challenges us to build societies that reject fear and exclusion and instead foster welcome and inclusion. Addressing the challenges of migration and displacement require the concerted efforts of multiple stakeholders. While governments play a crucial non-state actors, civil society, institutions, academia, and academia have unique responsibilities. Civil society. NGOs, communities, organizations, and advocacy groups must continue to provide direct support to migrants while also holding policymakers accountable and shaping policy. And then when I think of society, of civil society, by the way, I'm not only thinking of, example, legal questions, which many times is an issue with many people are involved, but it's also on issues like, for example, how to help a migrant to find his way into the society, how to assist a migrant maybe in finding a job, how to assist migrants in learning the language, how to assist the children of migrants in finding their ways through systems that maybe they have. All this are typically roles, I would say, for this. They must ensure access to essential services and foster networks of solidarity at grassroots level. They must also create platforms that amplify the voices of migrants to be heard while acting as the first responders and fostering grassroots actions that empower migrants. Religiously, faith communities have historically played a crucial role in welcoming the religious leaders must continue to promote messages of compassion, justice, and inclusion, countering xenophobia and fostering interfaith cooperation. They must reinforce the ethical imperatives, hospitality, inclusion, and that is many times a challenge, by the way, for many of the religious leaders, because that is the neighbor per definition. So that the neighbor might be difficult for us as a receiving culture. How do you receive that neighbor exactly? How do you love that neighbor in such a way that you respect her or his dignity, her or his culture? These are real challenges where also religious leaders have to step in. And further, the academia, the intellect. Scholars and educators have the power to shape public discourse on migration by producing research that informs policy, developing curricula that promote global understanding, and creating platforms for dialogue. Academia can contribute to a more informed justice. The academia, therefore, have an obligation to research, document, and educate societies on the positive impacts of migration, providing evidence-based recommendations for sustainable migration policy, inclusive governance. In conclusion, it is important to note that belonging is not privilege. It is a fundamental human right. It is a fundamental human need. As we navigate the complexities of migration, we must remember that the fate of migrations is intertwined with the future of our society. Their experiences challenge us to rethink human existence, redefine mutual care, and build a lasting consensus on shared values. Our collective response will determine whether we build walls of division or bridges of solidarity. And especially now in the new political situations we find ourselves in the United States, but also in many countries in Europe, that challenge of whether we build walls of division or bridges of solidarities becomes ever more acute. Let us choose the right. Let us then stand together, work together, and belong together in the pursuit of a world where every person, regardless of religion, finds safety, dignity, and placed. Reality of migration is not a challenge to be feared, but an opportunity to be embraced. It is an invitation to reaffirm our shared humanity, strengthen global solidarity, and build a future where everyone, regardless of where they come from, find a place. Together, let us commit to a world where movement is not met with walls, but with open arms. A world where we all stand and move together as pilgrims of hope for today and for generations. This endeavor calls for courage and selflessness. Advocating for the rights of refugees, migrants, and displaced people is not a means. It is. That is a battle. And there is always resistance. The voices of exclusion are loud and violent, as we have witnessed these days, yet they have to be conquered through fearlessness and informed. I call upon you all to act decisively as we push together rights of vulnerable groups and society. All called. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And I would like to remind our listeners and our viewers that His Excellency Hubertus van Megen is the Apostolic Nuncio to Kenya. And in his speech, he has made us reference to his past experience as Nuncio to South Sudan, and later on Nuncio to Kenya and South Sudan. And we know the situation in Sudan and South Sudan with the refugees from South in the north, and then the north going back to South Sudan. So speaking from a personal experience of encounter with a community of refugees and migrants. The Nuncio, His Excellency, started by reminding us of the readings of today in the Catholic Church, which called us to remember to welcome the strangers. Like Abraham, our father in faith, welcomed also, the strangers, and who are also a blessing. The Nuncio challenged us to look back into the history of our own nations and the history of our families, that we are a mixture of migration. Yeah, and he spoke about his personal experience. Yeah. The Nuncio stresses very much that although we see often the refugees and migrants and displaced people as a burden, actually they are a blessing to the host communities, and and called us to really to cherish that their contribution to the society. He called us for collective responsibility in welcoming migrants, refugees, and displaced people as our brothers and sisters. And then he ended up with a call to action, actually, which calls everybody, the society at large. The civil society has to play a big role. The faith communities, religious leaders have a role to play, and also the academia. And as you know, this conference has been organized by Global Ministries University in California and Tangaza University here in Kenya, together with Harmony Institute. Hekima College, and then we have also partners from Uganda and Malawi. Yeah, so it's within the academic setup that we have organized this conference. So your message, Your Excellency, speaks directly to us as an academic community to see research, document, as you said, on the impact of positive impact of religious and academic institutions on the impact of refugees, displaced persons, and the society. So we are going to take up that challenge as an academic institution. Really, we have a database. Later on, tomorrow, we will have another group which will be led by also experts on the field and who are really working on the database of all this that we are talking about. So we take at heart your action, your call to action. And thank you very much, Your Excellency, for your also presence and contribution to this conference. In the room, we have Brother Rogers, who is a missionary of Africa. He works in the Vicariate for Migrants and Refugees in the Diocese of Arua, where they have a big population of refugees from South Sudan. I would like him to react to your intervention, Your Excellency, and then kick off if there are people online who would like also to interact with their questions. They are most welcome. So, Brother Rogers, welcome.
Yeah.
Just give us a few remarks from the intervention of His Excellency, the Nuncio to Kenya. Welcome, Brother Rogers.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really grateful to be part of the conversation, especially when it comes to Pope Francis's message in Fratelli Tutti, as well as connecting it to the issues of migration and refugees. And indeed, His Excellency has made very clear statements with regard to our response as religious leaders, as well as many stakeholders that are involved in the action and as the conversation that can improve our response to the migrants and the refugees. I just wanted to pick up one point that I found really very important from the message of His Excellency, the aspect of solidarity and compassion towards migrants and refugees. Having worked quite for 3 years in the refugee context here in the Diocese of Arua in Uganda, I have found this aspect very important. First of all, it emphasizes the aspect of being present to the refugees in their situations. And as a missionary working among these refugees, I have found this aspect of solidarity and compassion very important. This is because the refugees present many issues, and at times you find yourself helpless. But as much as we are closer to them, much as we listen to their challenges, and as much as we keep our presence to them, they feel accompanied through the aspect of solidarity and compassion. And this gives them hope that there are people around us. So I keep on in my intervention and my activities among the refugees to emphasize with all our stakeholders that we should all be compassionate to our refugees because the situations they have gone through are really traumatic. They have created a lot of wounds within their lives. And if we are absent in their lives, we end up even making more difficulty of their lives. But if we are more compassionate and present to them, they feel accompanied and renewed hope. Thank you very much for the message, His Excellency. And I'm happy to be part of this conversation and share our experiences from our Ugandan side. Thank you so much.
So thank you very much, Brother Rogers and your team. And we know that really is a whole vicariate which has been set up just to take care of refugees in that part of Uganda, and where you have many stakeholders, including the refugee service of the Jesuits, and also working together with the local and the national government and the international stakeholders to ensure that there is harmony between the refugees and host communities, but at the same time to see that with the compassion, solidarity, and presence to the refugees, to see that you can also help into their well-being and insertion into the society. Yeah. So thank you very much. Let's see if there are comments online. Otherwise, we will close the session and we will wait for the next session. Yeah. So thank you very much. Yeah. I remind you that all our interventions will be published in a special volume on migrants, refugees, and displaced person, and that will be our third volume. Each conference since 2021 we comes out with a publication, and that's our contribution also as an academic community to help reflect more on these issues that come out of Fratelli Tutti. Thank you very much. Yeah. So we have just a few minutes if there are any reaction and comment online. And if not, then we will end the session and wait now for the next panel, which will be from 10:30, led by Hekima University College here in Nairobi, and followed by the panel from Uganda and Malawi, where they will be talking about their personal experience with involvement with refugees and displaced, because these countries also host a big number of
maybe I may come in a moment
from the region. Yes,
maybe I can come in. Am I allowed to come in? Yeah, just to share a bit. Having, as I mentioned, lived in Khartoum, having worked in Juba, therefore having been very close to people. By the way, people who were coming in and people who were leaving. Like Khartoum, many Eritreans would come in, cross the border. Many of the South Sudanese, especially when we had the tribal conflict, the tribal war of, is it 2013 to 2016, more or less, there was a lot of upheaval in South Sudan. And so many South Sudanese crossed the border into the north. And as was also mentioned by Father Rogers, how important it was to give sometimes just even a listening ear to these people so that they could share their stories, the horrors they had to go through, the people they lost on the road. That kind of, when Father Rogers was speaking about solidarity, that's and compassion, that's what it is all about. Also to understand more. Yes, I mentioned it also in my speech, how privileged I am in the way that I did not have to go through this kind of ordeal as many of the refugees and migrants have to go through. Then again, I had many contacts and friends who left Khartoum in search for a better life. They would cross the Libyan desert. They would be, let's just remember we had the days of ISIS, especially in Libya at that point. I know personally of 2 people who got killed because of that. Then you have people who crossed the Mediterranean. Once again, I know one person that I knew personally who drowned in the Mediterranean. Then they come into Europe. And that is a whole new chapter that starts with new challenges. Many ways people think they come into promised land and then find out it's not promising at all. And how do receiving society, host society, country, how do you react? And I think that is again very important. The civil society, but also for churches and mosques to come in to receive those people and to give them, even though it's very difficult, give them at least minimum sense of, right? With all the problems there might be, but once again, to be able to listen to their stories, provide them with the most necessary means, provide at least maybe hope, those kind of issues. Then also start teaching the children. Very important. And these are things where also churches come in many times, to give them that kind of initial structure and to give them a feeling, yes, there is a future. We don't let you hang. And these are the kind of things where we as civil society, as churches, as mosques, there's a lot to do. There's a lot where we also, in a sense, can practice our faith, where we can improve our virtues. And I think that is very important. The migrants, displaced, the poor in general are there. They challenge us in order that we would give ourselves more. And I think that is very basic in the discussion we might have on migrants. And I follow, still very much engaged with some migrants also volunteering, trying to help them in finding a better future. And there are many challenges people have. Probably are not. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, and thank you very much, Brother Rogers, of what you do in Germany. We shall going to hear more in your presentation, but also thank you for Harmony Institute, Yusuf, and also your presence among the vulnerable people with the Hizmet movement here in Kenya. And Harmony Institute here to support the technical part of this conference. So, Yusuf, thank you very much. I think there is the message of His Excellency is very, very, very clear. It's a call to action, which is addressed to different categories of all stakeholders. Yeah, and we are, as religious leaders and also the academicians, we have a big role to play, especially to document on the positive impact of the refugees, displaced people, and migrants in their host communities. This is an aspect that has been really forgotten. We see them as, the world see them as a burden, close the walls, yeah, and close the borders, but they don't really realize and recognize the important role that they play into the society. Your Excellency, actually, this is a call that we have heard and would like to continue the conversation even after the conference, so that we start that process of a positive outlook on the contribution of the refugees and the migrants in the society. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will close the session, and then we'll continue with our next panel led by Hekima University College and the leadership of Professor Elias Opongo at 10:30. Once again, Your Excellency, we appreciate very much your presence and your contribution to this conference. Thank you.